Hello. So, Jeffrey here with 14 years later, and I have a very important topic as a Republican to discuss. So, I actually became a Republican when President Donald Trump, was elected in his first term. Shortly after the election, I believe the day after, possibly. I became a Republican, and I was understanding the concept earlier, somewhat earlier. And I was sort of influenced by humans who I knew who had become Republican or were Republican, and humans I had acquaintanceships with. And I really like from like high school. And I realized I wanted something different. I've discussed different reasons for having become a Republican, but I was born as like a Democrat, into a Democrat family. My father and mother were Democrats, and I'm an only child. And I was used to interacting with Democrats. And then in my late 20s, actually, I was at, if I understand correctly, I was at my first, in my first admission, my first academic year at USC, the law school there, the Gould School of Law. I had left, and I believe Donald Trump was elected then. So I hope you don't pinpoint my age. But yeah, so I started to think, may Donald Trump be successful, and may he do well as president. And he had campaigned about building a wall, if I remember correctly, his first term. Prior to his first term, earlier than his first term, he had campaigned about building a wall along the border of the USA with Mexico. And I was initially like taken aback somewhat, because not taken aback. I was like sort of hurt, because I thought this was like sort of overt racism. And I realized like after he was elected, after like election day or whatever it was exactly, whenever the time was, that I wished he would be successful as a president, for the sake of the USA and humans across the world. And I wasn't aware. I don't think I was aware he has like German ancestry, or like is disproportionately of German ancestry. I thought he was like an Englishman. Though my mother, she really liked Donald Trump for like, I think like decades, possibly. And my father, he has like respect for Donald Trump, I think. So, I became a Republican, and I think my parents soon after also became Republicans. But like, I've never voted. I don't think my parents have either of my parents have voted. But we became more aligned to being a Republican. I was years after, I think, I started to have an idea of what I could make an argument for, which would be sort of substantive, about having a wall. Because at first I think I thought it was like funny, even though I'm not laughing at the moment, that it was like the Great Wall of China, and that the US humans would be Chinese, because I had like resentment, you could say, and I was hurt. So I was like, it was sort of funny if, because humans make fun of like Asians, and they make like Chinese jokes and everything. And I was like, okay, well, it's funny because now the USA is a bunch of Chinese humans. But after this, I had realized that I think a wall, because we have like, I think Ronald Reagan, former President Ronald Reagan, may he rest in peace also. I believe he had said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, about the Berlin Wall. And now we're talking about building a wall, or then we were talking about building a wall along the southern border of the US. And I believe Donald Trump had said Mexico would pay for the wall. And I was willing to pay with like tax money. I understand that, I understand Republicans usually want like lower taxes, but I'm all for, some taxes to do work which is necessary. But my argument was this for a wall. I felt like as a Republican, and thinking about, more about what happens in the USA and in North America and where we are on Earth physically. I felt like building a wall would bring law and lawful like order to Latin America disproportionately. Not only Mexico, not only Mexico, but Latin America. Because so to get humans across the wall, for instance, like over the wall by air, I assume, disproportionately, or like if there's like a land-based entry, they would have to make higher order physically of, I think I've discussed this in a different video, but they would have to make higher order physically in nations such as Mexico or Central America or even into South America. I assume, like eventually, they would have to make higher order of paperwork and legality and who actually physically is who. So humans wouldn't be coming to the USA and be sort of lacking in legality, in order, in lawfulness, in what they are given. Because we talk about like ICE now in President Donald Trump's second term, and we're seeing humans being like murdered, essentially, possibly accidentally, actually accidentally, or otherwise. But when a human is murdered, we don't have Jesus Christ at the moment to resurrect the human, which isn't a joke. I'm not making fun. I believe Jesus Christ was a human 100%, but a prophet and a Messiah, and he did work miracles in what I believe, in my faithful disposition toward who he is. But so, humans are being murdered, and it's because the organization, the sense of order, the sense of legality isn't being provided disproportionately to them by their home nation, by where they were born, where their house had been. And then in the US, all won't be as aware as I would have imagined in the past. And many are unaware who is who. They get worried. Humans get worried in the USA. They're afraid of terrorists. They're afraid of cannibals. They're afraid a human could be like mentally challenged and like attack them or something. They're afraid of mass shootings. They're afraid of theft, robbery, stabbings, like individual shootings, group attacks, gangs. So they're not generally aware. And if there was a greater, I know I sound like a nerd, so I understand, but if there was a greater amount of legality, paperwork, understanding earlier than the individuals are on the physical ground of the USA, this would protect them. This would protect those individuals. And it's like, I think if the wall were there, this would force the United States, I will pay personally, I don't have too much money, so so I would pay for this, because it's like, if those humans aren't murdered, I don't have to live with the guilt, the sin, the evil, which a murder entails, or like brings about, or like continues. So they would have greater recourse to where they are of, and where they, so where they're from, and also in the USA, like ahead of, earlier than what their arrival ends up being, how they arrive. And also there would be, in my understanding, a disproportionate amount of employment, because you need, like, I would imagine, thousands and thousands of humans of the USA to control the wall, maintain the wall, control entry and exit, and to develop. I feel like I have deja vu. I feel like I've explained this in a different video disproportionately, but in light of new news, I wanted to discuss this in more detail. But so thousands of humans, in addition, like I did mention, at airports, we would have to build or like use different technology to allow them to like more easily or higher easily gain access when they have legal allowance to enter the US. So I thought I was thinking this would be a good use of resources, and it would further legality in Latin America, in the towards the south, into South America. I thought this would be a greater way to have, for instance, humans of the USA to also learn Spanish or possibly like Portuguese, because there would be a more formal use of entry and exit, and a more legal use of entry and exit into the USA. But like, unfortunately, I've said in like different videos, the USA isn't as guilty as, like, for instance, Europe has been, because I believe the Jews are God's chosen people, and the Holocaust was in Europe. Even if everyone isn't guilty, all won't have been like at the same level as each other. But the USA, yes, there was the, let's say, murder, to keep it like, there was the genocide, extermination, murder of Native Americans, and there was the slavery of West African descended Black humans. But so there is this issue, but in my understanding of faith, and what God allows, God has allowed who I am to understand God, to feel they are God's chosen people, and may God's chosen people win. So I do not feel allegiance ever as highly to the cause of the ending of genocide toward any population. As far as I understand, I think I would have to say who I am first, because I am an individual who, like, God allowed to be, of conception of my father and mother, and I was born, and I live. But the Jews is the number one answer. And as like a Muslim, or like you could say a Musalmun, I feel the higher guilt, like all won't be higher guilty than what the Europeans have been. And again, not the entirety, but the Englishman is different to a degree, to an extent, actually. Though, like the pogroms and obviously what happened to Jesus Christ, his crucifixion, though I'm a Musalmun, I think we have some evidence that he was possibly crucified and lived after, because of his faith in what God allows. But so, yes, the higher guilty I think are Europeans, but I don't mean to like complain too much about the USA for this reason, but there still are issues within the USA. And I was getting too off topic. I just felt like the USA has humans which are harder to blame, and the blame game doesn't work as well in the USA because of, at the least they were anti-Hitler, and they did war against the Nazis on sort of the Western front, I guess. Whereas like the Soviet Union is warring from the Eastern Front. But the building of the wall would have been great, because Republicans usually talk about money, and I guess funds, and it would have been great if the war against Iran, with Israel and the USA versus Iran, didn't take priority over the building of the wall. And if there was like a peace deal being worked out, minus like threats of civilization ending, and the Japanese solution, which is to nuclear bomb the Japanese, and then make tons of pornography with Japanese women, indecent things, and then it's like like a non-ending sort of like evil toward who the Iranians are. And it's like, well, some Republicans have said like, well, like it's in the Bible that, you will be blessed by God if you, assist God's chosen people. What are you doing when you keep pressuring the Jews, non-ending, to go forward with war? You've turned the Jews and the Iranians within Shem genome. I understand God's chosen people are different, but Shem's genome disproportionately, though also Japheth and Indo-European language in Iran, for instance. but you're turning them into like a group warfare type of gladiators where they have to war each other and kill each other and commit genocide, and apparently civilizations end, which I guess implies the Iranians will be extinct. So I am an extinct human, if I understand correctly, according to Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. And in my estimation, actually, it's like, just go build a wall. You should have used the money to build a wall. You should have redirected the Pentagon to build a wall. Humans in the USA will have been safer, will have been safe had you built the wall instead of beginning a like destructive type of genocide, non-ending and causing the civil war, what I think in thousands of years, if humans somehow survive, in like 4,000 years, this will have been understood as like the great inter-Shem civil war in the Middle East. Making them fight to death like gladiators and having non-ending conflict instead of being a peacemaker, and then building a wall to establish formal legality at like a higher level would have been a great use of like $40 billion, I guess, US dollars. So that's just my opinion. And I think this is, for many individuals, truly spiraling out of control, because I'm going to be honest, there's like this issue where humans don't understand what it means to genocide humans. And remember, the Jews, I will have thought, aren't under the impression the Iranians had specifically make the Holocaust happen and carried out the Holocaust. They just don't want to be like attacked by like Africans and Europeans and North Americans and South Americans and Australians and anyone in Antarctica and like much of Asia when they're weak about the issue at the same instance, just because they have like under 100 nuclear weapons. There's a limit to their suffering, and there's a limit to saying like extinction of the Iranian will happen, and enslavement of Shia Muslims, like incorrectly, like I've said, like repeatedly ad nauseum, where it's like Sunni groups of like Saudi Arabian individuals and Pakistani individuals are committing the September 11th attacks, and it's Sunni Hamas Palestinians who are committing the October 7th attacks, and it is Sunni ISIS which is causing those disturbing wars and attacks in Iraq and Syria, and it's like, what else am I missing? Oh no, I have to think. Oh, it's Sunni Saddam Hussein, who is like warring like anyone he can, first like Iran, then I guess Kuwait, then like I guess trying to resist the USA, but I guess may Saddam Hussein burn in hell, and may his father burn in hell. And what am I gonna do? So yes, it's like, yes, but Iran had Sinwar, I guess was his name, like he was like hiding in Iran. Okay, well, this can't be like non-ending. Okay, go hide him like Bashar Assad in Russia, and then go like, yes, there's the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but go like in Russia, go like into Russia, and like earlier than you go into hell, go into Russia and then kill in Russia. What is this? Like, okay, so if any ally attacks it's just non-ending. You should have just built the wall. I'm not Joseph in ancient Egypt, despite what you would think. But what can I say? I guess this term is going to come to an end soon. And yeah, I mean, we saw Adolf Hitler, an Austrian, and then we saw like Arnold Schwarzenegger, an Austrian after. I guess Arnold Schwarzenegger considers himself of the USA also. But So now I guess in terms of like, Holocaust and everything, and we're possibly describing nuclear Holocaust on the part of Donald Trump. So we have Donald Trump of like German ancestry of the USA, and let's see what type of bodybuilder we get like after from like German ancestry disproportionately. So you all won't be like too bored, or like you won't have thought the popularity contest was too obvious, and you can continue to worship West African descended individuals like blacks, and you can worship women instead of worshiping God, and looking very simply at the 10 Commandments and understanding what to do, or like the 5 pillars of Islam, or the 7 deadly sins and everything, or is it the 32 signs of Buddha? Yeah, but there's a really big difference between building a wall and adding legality, and destroying legality by homiciding humans, by murdering humans. So what can I say? You went into, for instance, Venezuela and got Maduro, okay? And you're having trouble with Cuba, I guess, to do the same. And you've now killed an Ayatollah. So I guess I guess he isn't like too high level, but so sort of like a pope. You killed like a pope. And it's like, okay, am I like never invested in like what the USA is? I mean, if I look at the 10 Commandments, thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother, thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother, I guess. And it's like my father and mother are of the Middle East, of their birth, but my father and mother decided, they chose, they believed to move to the USA is better. So not only is it the case only that I am of the USA, of where I was born, but my father and my mother, it was like their like conscious decision to move to the USA, and you're like destroying this with like simple basic misunderstanding of how to fund the USA. Because let's be honest, if like Iran is like this difficult for you, what are you when China has an issue with you, or you have an issue with China? You could have at least prepared earlier and built a wall and made the USA more like the Chinese, so you could understand and just pull the difference. But as far as like Latin Americans, like Amerindians, since, I'll just put this basically, since you be support those who be genocide me, I be do to you as you do to me, except I do the higher to you. So just very basically. And it's like anybody gets on your side is going to get the same. So individuals do no necessarily believe this to be the case, but an individual has a higher amount of power than a group in many cases. So anyways, I'll describe more about that in detail later, but I think you would be better if you would please think, may we now build a wall, instead of continuing to war in the Middle East, because it's going to be a little difficult to also use those Bibles to swear in courts. For instance, when the Bible says in the New Testament, blessed are the peacemakers, and the gospel according to Matthew, of Jesus Christ, the gospel of Jesus Christ. So the glad tidings, also known as good news, I believe, has said the good news of Jesus Christ, the glad tidings of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ has said, he has say, what are the exact words? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. So the translation, I think, is essentially, if you refer to the 10 Commandments, thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother. It's having, it's like saying you have a father or you have a mother. You aren't motherless or fatherless. Or it can be translated into different languages so you can understand. Like, for example, Farsi, like without father, without mother in Farsi language. But, which I'm not, I don't understand too much about Farsi in my relation to the Fars province. but you know, sort of like, I guess, like blood cousin to me if I'm Shem on my father's side. But anyways, so as a Republican, I guess as a slave king, you remember Jeffrey 14 years later, but as a Republican and as a Musalmun, I'd like to explain peace is no to be unto all. All won't receive peace. Okay, and this doesn't mean I believe to kill. I believe in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. And I don't believe to like murder or whatever it is. But since you have no peace, I'm like offering a way out of this situation, build a wall, and deal with the Latin American individuals instead of dealing with the Middle East. Okay, it's been a quarter of a century soon, and it's been a century also with the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, and on and on and on to now. So yes, I urge you to remain higher factually correct and use your funds in a peaceful manner to receive peace, or else what am I gonna say? Do I pick your legality, or I just like pretend, fake this like consciously, or do I pick the Quran, for instance? What do I do? Because in the Quran we believe God has explained, God has allowed us to understand, and I read this, you know, essentially like oppressors or the evil or the unbelievers, you aren't to allow them to behave as they do or to act as they do, actually. So yeah, but there is legality, of course, and we live in a nation state era, like a time, and what the earth is. So yeah, I would imagine I'm going to have to take the Republican Party by storm, and it's not like a threat, but politically I believe I'm the stronger and the higher. So yeah, I urge you to earlier understand and earlier begin the process of what I'm describing, and I urge, if there are two sides, I urge both sides to, as early as possible, without, you know, harming each other, without hurting each other, or hurting within the population you're in, no matter what has happened, to begin to be higher peaceful, if possible, or behave higher peacefully. Thank you. 100% human, 0% divine, just saying hello. Jeffrey, see you later.